One of my favorite hobbies is collecting old toys from the 1970s. So today, I thought I'd paint a couple of them. I'm doing this video today in conjunction with my good friend and art family member, Jared Cullum. Jared is a man of many art talents. He has a fantastic channel that I'm sure many of you are already aware of, where he does demos with watercolor and sometimes gouache and sometimes oil, all sorts of things. He's just a great guy and a fantastic artist. So if you haven't before, go check out his channel. More gouache! As you can see in the video, he's painting his own childhood toys. And that video is available to watch now. So I will link his channel in the description below. Starting today on an Arches watercolor block. This is 140-pound cold pressed paper, and I'm drawing the Mego Batman and Robin figures fairly carefully because I want them to come off as actual toys and not just wonky paintings or drawings or whatever of the characters. I want them to come across as toys. So I'm going to be very careful about proportions and how the clothing folds on the plastic bodies, that sort of thing. I played with these toys back in the early 1970s, which is kind of dating myself a little bit. To some of you younger viewers, that probably seems like an eternity ago. But to me, it was just a few years. So anyway, Mego produced all sorts of figures. They produced superhero figures. They produced figures from movies and television, like Planet of the Apes and Star Trek. And they produced toys up through the 1980s, the early 1980s. So I'm trying to draw these guys as if, like the photo, as if you're looking down at them on a surface. So I wanted to get the shadows coming off of their feet and legs. And so also the heads and torsos are going to be kind of large in comparison to the legs, in trying to get that perspective, trying to portray that perspective of a kind of a high angle photo of the characters here. Mego has actually resurfaced as a company last year after 30, 40 years of being out of business. The man who ran the company back then is working with some other people, and they've brought Mego back. So Mego is back producing superhero figures and movie and television figures, and they sell them at Target and online. So kind of cool. So I'm getting pretty close to being done with this drawing. I'm just trying to get some of the little details on the faces and things that really help them to look like the toy and not just like some random version of the character. I think I'm about done here, and what I'm doing now is putting some Scotch magic tape on the borders, and this stuff is great for really, really nice tight lines around your paintings. It's kind of something that I used to do when I did a Batman graphic novel for DC Comics. I used magic tape, Scotch magic tape, to tape off each panel because it left such a nice, crisp, clean edge. So obviously now I'm into the painting portion, and I've just sort of layered in a little bit of blue in the background and starting to put in some of the yellows that'll be in the painting, like Robin's cape and Batman's belt and chest symbol. This was kind of a weird painting for me because it was tough to stay loose, and I really didn't stay loose because I'm trying to make sure that these look like the toys and not just, like I mentioned before, like, you know, kind of poor paintings of just the characters. And so it was hard not to be tight and not be maybe a little too faithful with local color in terms of, making sure that everything was the right blue and the right gray and the right yellow, that type of thing. So um, in some ways, I think that maybe hindered any spontaneity or looseness in this painting. So it kind of is just sort of a straightforward little painting of these toys without a whole lot of spontaneity or inspiration. So I've worked in some of the blues and the red in Robin's tunic there, and you've noticed I've dropped in some kind of other colors, some blue in with the red and some warm tones in with Batman's blue cape, just to give a little color variety and a little shift in the color tones, so it's not all just um, just a single color. Man, I really loved these figures when I was a kid. I played with them all the time. I had the superhero ones, some Planet of the Apes figures. They were just a big part of my childhood, so I thought this was a good subject to paint for this little challenge that Jared and I came up with. You'll notice one of the very strong characteristics of this Mego Batman toy is the fact that for gloves they gave him these kind of plasticky oven mitts, and that's kind of what they're called among collectors these days, is oven mitts. And some, two or three of the Mego superhero figures had these these gloves that looked like big long oven mitts. They were constantly getting lost. I knew so many kids that had these figures, and most of them didn't have the gloves, the oven mitts. The emblems were just these basically paper stickers that were stuck on the fabric, and those either tore or came off pretty early in the in the lifespan of these figures. When kids would start to play with them, those were the first things to go. Usually, were the oven mitts and the emblems. Okay, I'm just sort of painting in the boots there, trying to leave some highlights on the toes there. The highlights that show the plasticiness of a lot of these little elements in here is going to be important to show that they're toys. Just kind of working in some of the details on Batman's face there, trying to model the lighting that's going on. There's light coming in from the left side, and so I'm trying to establish that with some darks on the right side, and also hopefully retain some of that reflected light. As I mentioned in the intro, one of my favorite hobbies is collecting these old toys from my childhood, and it's always just been a lot of fun trying to track down things I had as a kid, things I didn't have as a kid. Um, I don't know why I have this affinity for old toys. I've talked to fellow collectors about it quite a bit, and um, I don't know. They just sort of bring back these kind of cherished memories and feelings that photos just don't do justice to. Like, my wife asks me all the time, "Why don't you just look at a photo? Why don't you just 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 look at old commercials and remember these things?" And it's different to actually hold these items in your hands, to actually interact with these old things you had as a kid. They, like I said, they bring back so many old memories and emotions and thoughts. Playing with friends, things of that nature. That just a memory or a photo just don't seem to, at least for me, bring to mind. So that's why I collect this old stuff. I think toys in general were probably more important to my generation than they are to maybe a newer generation. This was pre-video games, um, pre pre being able to watch movies at home, pre um, tons of cable channels. Before all of that stuff, before all the things that are available for kids to kind of entertain themselves with were around. So we played with toys. We played with these little figures and things, and acted out adventures, and jumped our Evil Knievels over dirt hills, and just had a blast with these old toys. And so there's so many just great memories, at least for me, that are wrapped up in these things. And so I really enjoy collecting these old things and putting them on display, and just having fun having them around. So I'm starting to work in some of these shadows to kind of define the surface that the figures are standing on. I was probably a little too timid with them because I need to go back and strengthen them a little bit later here. Adding a little more detail to the boots to kind of show some of the reflections going on the plastic. Some shadows in the fabric. I've been a Batman fan also for many, many years. He's probably my favorite fictional character. And as some of you may know, I used to be a comic book artist, and one of the projects that I worked on was a Batman graphic novel for DC Comics. So that was a real privilege and an honor to get to do that, to actually work on my favorite character. And this painting is kind of a poor representation of how I would most likely paint Batman, at least back in the day. So, what toys did you like to play with when you were a kid? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. Or um, if you're an artist and want to paint your childhood toys like Jared and I have done, just use the hashtag um, childhood toy art and join in on the project. We'd love to see a lot more childhood toy paintings out there, and it'd be fun to see what people played with and how they paint them. Okay, I'm just kind of going in and popping in some details and trying to establish some of the things going on the Robin figure. There's his mask and some of the darks in the hair going in. Trying to leave some little spots where the light is hitting some of the textures in the sculpt of the figure. The Robin figure was the same height as the Batman figure. Mego used a standard 8-inch body for all of their figures, at least in the beginning they did. And so that always bugged me as a kid that Robin was the same height as Batman in these figures. Okay, more wrinkles going in some of the fabric uh, on the figures. A little more face detail on Robin there. What's interesting is that uh, back in the late 60s, when the Batman TV show was on the air and was really popular, they didn't license toys and merchandise the same way that they do now. If you have a Batman movie that comes out now and they make toys, they usually try to make the toys look like the actors, and they really tie that into the look of the characters in the movies, or whatever, the TV show, or whatever they're merchandising at the time. So back when the TV show came out, they really didn't have things that were directly licensed to the TV show. They were more tied in with the comic books. And so um, you really didn't have action figures and toys and things that were directly based on the TV show. So um, these figures, in a way, sort of were. I mean, we had a Batman that had pupils instead of the directly white eyes. Um, and there were a lot of little nods to the TV show in terms of um, the car, the Batmobile that they produced for these figures that they could ride in was a cheap little plastic thing, but it looked like the TV show car. So there was some kind of strange merchandising things going on back then, where um, you had nods to the TV show, but nothing that was directly merchandised from the TV show. So I'm going back in at this point and I'm strengthening up some of the colors, the yellows in Robin's cape mainly. Trying to erase some of the pencil lines, but I used kind of a dark pencil and they were kind of tough to get rid of. Adding just a little bit of interest in that bottom corner. I decided to, you'll notice in the reference there's a lot of background detail, just stuff that was around my desk when I took the pictures. And so I thought it would be a good idea to contrast the white plane, the white, very light surface they're standing on, with kind of a very dark background, and kind of punch these figures out against a very dark background. And so that's what I'm doing here. Going in with a lot of Payne's gray and some other little touches of other colors, and just sort of darkening up that background. And giving these figures a little bit of a nice clean edge in some ways. This is always one of the more fun parts of a painting to me, is when I can get loose in a background and sort of just drop colors in and let them do what they will, in a sense. Okay, I think this is just about finished here. I don't think I do a whole lot more. See a little bit more strengthening of the shadows around the legs there. So a little bit of detail behind Batman's glove there to kind of show that Robin does have a second foot. So that's kind of why that little bit was put back there. Strengthening the point in his cape. At this point, I'm going in and I'm just hitting some of the little highlights and details with white gouache. And this is sort of back to the idea that I mentioned before, trying to make sure that the plastic pieces that are part of this toy stand out as being plastic. And so these little white highlights will help that to some degree. I really do a number on Robin's eyes there. I kind of smudged them out by accident, and had to go back in and kind of fix things with the white gouache. More gouache. All right, so I'm peeling off the tape, and I believe this is the end of the little demo. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's brought back maybe some memories of some old toys that you've had. So thanks for watching, and take care. I'll see you next time.